It just went by as a blur. I mean, he was so fast. And in dailies, they went in to look at some of the stuff before he slowed him down some. And sure enough, it was just and a bunch of yelling and a black blur and people flying, and he was something else.
To promote the Green Hornet, the stars appeared on the hit series Batman. But Bruce's temper flared when the writers planned to have him fight with Burt Ward's character Robin and lose.
I'll never forget the day that the scripts came down on the set. All of a sudden I heard this, bang, slam, bang, wham. I said, Jesus Christ, because Bruce had a short temper, so did I. And occasionally we'd get ticked off about something and blow up, and then it'd all be over, and you know. But it just kept going, and it went further and further away, and all of a sudden I heard the outside door slam, and then I heard a car, and screeching brakes, and
Good thing those guys aren't in town every week.
Burt Ward was trembling in his tights because Bruce had put out the word he was going to take down Robin for real.
I tell you what, it's amazing that he didn't wet his pants. He might have his costume. But it was a very touchy situation there for a while.
In the end, Bruce made a joke out of the non-brawl. The scene was shot without incident, and Robin and Kato fought to a draw.
What do we have here? A Mexican standoff?
But Kato and the Green Hornet could not win the ratings fight. The show lasted just one season, and now Bruce had a growing family to support. Brandon was born in 1965 and was the light of his life. Shannon's arrival 4 years later filled Linda and Bruce's Los Angeles home with love.
He did the best at everything that he could, which includes being a father, being a husband, as well as being a martial artist and an actor and a philosopher and being a good friend to many people.
To make ends meet, Bruce returned to teaching Jeet Kune Do. Only now, his students were Hollywood stars like James Coburn.
Beautiful. That's it.
Bruce videotaped lessons to teach Coburn the ways of Jeet Kune Do. At the same time, Bruce was learning how to choreograph fights for the camera. Another regular at Bruce's backyard gym was basketball great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He gave Bruce a unique challenge.
I certainly tested him. My reach was a big problem for him. He liked problems like that because most people didn't test him. He was a lot more of a challenge for me than I was for him.
Bruce became enamored with Hollywood's rich and famous, and there was no star bigger than his student Steve McQueen. Bruce vowed to become just as big a star. Here, in his only existing television interview, Bruce talks about the training sessions with his big screen idol.
Now, as a fighter, Steve McQueen, now, he is good in that department because that son of a gun got the toughness in him.
Yeah, I mean, see it on the screen.
I mean, he would say, all right, baby, here I am, man. You know, and he'll do it.
With all his expertise, the one thing Bruce Lee never did was compete. But he did teach the greatest competitors. Joe Louis was the top karate champ when he trained with Bruce Lee.
I was a student of his. There are a number of people, very famous fighters, who won't admit that Bruce actually trained them.
After he trained with the Little Dragon, Joe went on to win an unheard of 11 consecutive grand championships. In the late 60s, Hollywood flirted with Bruce, but there was no marriage. He worked with Dean Martin as a fight choreographer in The Wrecking Crew and appeared in the movie Marlowe with James Garner. Bruce developed a script for a film to be called The Silent Flute and scouted locations in India with James Coburn. And he had a lead role in the pilot episode of the TV series Longstreet opposite James Franciscus. Bruce essentially played himself, teaching the essence of Jeet Kune Do.
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
But despite his modest success, Hollywood still would not invest in a Chinese star. The lead role in the TV show Kung Fu, a series Bruce helped develop, went to a Caucasian, David Carradine.
They were afraid that a Chinese star would not be bankable in Hollywood. He decided if he could not get into Hollywood through the front door, he was going to go around the back and come in the side door. And that is exactly what he did.
The door wasn't in Hollywood, it was in Asia. While The Green Hornet was just a memory in the States, it was a huge hit in Hong Kong. Only there it was called The Kato Show. When Bruce took Brandon to visit his family in Hong Kong, he was surprised to be recognized everywhere he went. Bruce Lee's star status was rising.
I've never seen anybody enjoy the celebrity that he was having in Hong Kong or any place. I mean, anybody else enjoyed as much as he enjoyed it. Sometimes people say, you know, was he spiritual? I say, yeah, perhaps, but I can see him much better in a Bentley than in a monastery, you know.
The Asian movie industry quickly saw his potential. So Bruce turned his back on Hollywood and signed a 2-picture deal for $15,000 with a Hong Kong movie company. The first film was Fists of Fury. The movie was shot on a budget of just $100,000. The first director was fired midway through production, and much of the script was made up along the way. Working against the odds, Bruce Lee brought an element of realism to the fight scenes. At the Hong Kong premiere, Bruce and Linda sat in the back of the theater, nervously awaiting the reaction of normally vocal movie fans.
So the movie was over. It was stone quiet. Nothing for about 10, 15 seconds, seemed like forever. And then cheers erupted in the audience. People stood up. They turned to find where Bruce was in the audience, applauding him, cheering. It was the most thrilling moment of his career.
The world was about to get a taste of Bruce Lee's greatness. The little dragon would conquer Hong Kong. And then take on Hollywood. Billions of Chinese movie fans. And Fists of Fury smashed every box office record in Hong Kong. Bruce had become a martial arts superstar.
Bruce in Hong Kong, it's tough to envision now, but then he was the equivalent of a Michael Jackson times 10. Bruce was so massive, you know, that he could not leave his house.
The word superstar really turned me off, and I'll tell you why. Because the word star, man, is an illusion. It's something what the public calls you. You should look upon oneself as an actor, man. I mean, you would be very pleased if somebody say, hey, man, you are a super actor. It is much better than, you know, superstar.
Now that they had a first-class star to bank on, the Hong Kong Film Company doubled the meager budget for Bruce's second movie, The Chinese Connection. What's not apparent on screen is that Bruce shot all the fight scenes in excruciating pain. He was tormented by a back injury he suffered lifting weights.
And what's ironic about that is that despite the fact he had this debilitating nerve problem with his lower back, he blossomed as a martial artist. He became a better martial artist after the back injury than he ever was.
Even though he could do those fabulous fight scenes that you see in the movies, afterwards it was always ice and heat and stretching and rest, and it was a trial.
Bruce capitalized on his box office success and took near total control of his third film, Return of the Dragon. Not only did he star, write, and direct, he choreographed all the fight scenes. Bruce Lee broke new ground in martial arts filmmaking. For the location, he chose Italy. The film was the first Chinese movie ever shot in Europe. For the fight scenes, instead of actors or stuntmen, he cast real martial arts champions. Bob Wall played thugs in 3 Bruce Lee films. Bruce liked the way he sold a punch. He was adept at taking whatever Bruce dished out, especially kicks to the groin.
He was very clever about knowing what the Chinese audience looked for, what they wanted. The Chinese like to see him get kicked in the groin. They like that extra pain because they felt psychologically they'd been kicked in the groin for a lot of years.
Bruce wanted the climactic scene in Return of the Dragon to be the ultimate fight. His first choice for a worthy opponent was Joe Louis. Joe missed an opportunity of a lifetime. Bruce turned to karate champ Chuck Norris for the Coliseum battle. The fight scene is lauded by fans as one of the best ever. It helped launch Norris's career in the movies. Again, Return of the Dragon surpassed the record set by his previous 2 films. Riding a wave of success, Bruce planned a new film to be his crowning achievement. Game of Death was to feature a remarkable mismatch. The 5'7" martial arts star battled his 7-foot-tall student, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Bruce wanted to make it a depiction of the problems he had boxing me. Basically all of our little episodes in the backyard. And the problems I presented to him with my reach and my relative quickness for someone of my size.
Game of Death was barely underway when Hollywood finally noticed Bruce Lee. He got an offer so attractive that he stopped shooting Game of Death and started on the movie that crowned him a martial arts superstar.
Warner Brothers presents Enter the Dragon, the first martial arts film produced by a major Hollywood studio.
He understood that this picture was going to be his showcase to Hollywood and to the West, and so he wanted it to be as good as it could be.
Martial arts movies had never seen this level of production. The budget was 6 times that of Fists of Fury. But when the movie started shooting in Hong Kong, the Hollywood producers were confronted with a serious dilemma. Bruce was so nervous, he couldn't face the camera. The crew shot every scene they could without Bruce.
Bruce was terribly nervous when we started filming. Very nervous. We were shooting for 2 weeks almost, and Bruce hadn't showed up yet. I was telling Warner Brothers the rush is a sensation, and Bruce hadn't showed up yet.
I could sense he was very nervous. His voice was like a cheese cutter. I mean, it was like a wire, you know. And I could almost swear that he was ready to levitate off the ground. He was like so wired.
But in fairness to Bruce, whatever nervousness there was the first 2 or 3 days of filming was completely gone by the end of the first week. And it was back to business as usual.
Bruce turned his nervousness into productive energy. The shoot was strenuous and not without problems. Both cast and crew had to struggle with language barriers. And much like a gunslinger in the Old West, Bruce faced real showdowns every day.
Everybody was always trying to challenge Bruce. It was part of the macho kind of thing that went on.
Never one to back down, Bruce accepted one challenge from an actor on the set.
It was a stupid kid who was saying something to him in Cantonese. And I think he said, well, why? The kid was sitting on like Simple Simon. I swear, he was sitting on a wall, you know, like, and he said, well, why don't you come down, you know, and the kid did.
All of a sudden, I could just see it in his eyes. I saw his eyes change, and he immediately went into too bad guy, and he kicked the out of this guy. And when that was done and he backed off, he smiled, helped the guy up, and said, back up on the wall.
The film's climax was shot in a room filled with thousands of mirrors. The signature fight scene almost didn't happen because Bruce did not think it would work.
Bruce did not want to do it. Bruce did not want to do it. And it fought all of us on it. But once he got into it, like everything, Bruce, once he got it, he made it better. You know, that was the other part that makes him great. He took it, developed it, and made it better. And that's what was wonderful.
Despite the triumph of filming his first Hollywood movie, there was no time for rest. In May of 1973, an exhausted Bruce Lee went straight to work dubbing the film's dialogue. It was hot in the studio, and he excused himself. Minutes later, a crew member found him passed out in a lavatory. Bruce came to, but then lost consciousness again and went into convulsions.
Of course, we had no idea what in the world was the matter. So I rushed to the hospital, and Bruce was unconscious, and they didn't know what was wrong.
And Bruce was on the brink of death, but pulled back. He could well have passed away on May 10th. But he came back and was alive, but it scared him, as it would anybody who didn't know what triggered it.
Bruce visited the best doctors in Los Angeles for a battery of tests.
I didn't know he was in town. I said, Joe, what are you doing here? And so on. He says, well, I got to go see the doctor and something like that. And then he said something, you know, very grave, like, maybe there won't be a Bruce Lee. And I thought, what are you talking about? I mean, those are grave words. Maybe there won't be a Bruce Lee. It's a kind of crazy premonition in a way.
The test results were surprising. They showed absolutely nothing wrong.
We don't really know what caused that. He was under a lot of stress, but the medical report from the doctors in the United States pronounced him in perfect health.
And he was excited. He was the same old Bruce again. I mean, his color was coming back, and certainly he hadn't gained his weight back, but he said, doctors said, body of an 18-year-old.
Reassured, Bruce headed back to Hong Kong to complete Game of Death and face his final challenge. Months after getting a clean bill of health, Bruce Lee returned to work on Game of Death. July 20th, 1973, Bruce faced a day full of meetings.
I was actually with him the day he passed away. He seemed fine. It's fair to say that he was excited but tired. That particular day, the only thing he complained about was having a headache.
That evening, Bruce went to the home of a friend to work on a script. Still complaining of a headache, he took some medication and lay down to rest.
I think late in the evening, maybe about 10 o'clock or something, I got a phone call saying Bruce had been taken to the hospital, and so I rushed over to the hospital, and Bruce was not there, had not come in yet, and so hanging around the hospital, not knowing what's going on, and talking to the staff